everyone. Thanks for stopping by. Welcome to the Route 3 podcast. My name is Tommy, and I'll be your host. My goal is to fill the world with real and honest conversation along and about the road of life. Sometimes things are going to get deep. Sometimes they're going to get funny. But it's always authentic. So buckle up. Let's go. Welcome to episode number 15. Today on the podcast, we've got James Clear. Now, seriously, you want to get better in life? You got some bad habits, things you don't do well, things you don't like that you do, but you still do them anyway. And it's not enough to quit cold turkey or stop doing something bad. But what if you just got a little bit better, day by day? Little bit by little bit, you compound that effect. And that's one thing James and I talk about today. James has got a great website. Talks about habit formation, talks about behavioral psychology, motivation, goal setting, and just ways to be more productive. But his book, Atomic Habits, that comes out October 16th, you can get it on Amazon, has been getting some pretty good reviews. You got Mark Manson, who did the #1 New York Times best-selling book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving says it's a practical and useful book, and it distills the most fundamental information about habit formation so you can accomplish more by focusing on less. And in my conversation, we kind of go over that kind of stuff, and he's the real deal. So enjoy, listen, go pick up his book, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. Maybe you can take something away and, make your life a little better. Anywho, enjoy. I really enjoyed this one. I know you will too. Thanks so much. All right, guys, welcome back to another Route 3 podcast. I've got with me today James Clear. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for asking me to come on and join you.
Hey, no problem at all. I know you've got a lot of stuff going on. I knew about you for the longest time, but it wasn't until somebody said, "Hey, do you know what he does?" And it was I was like, "No." So
neither do I.
Well, you got to know what you do. Everybody's like, "Well, hey, what do you do?"
So for a long time, I had trouble describing it, but both to my parents and family and everybody else. But it's not that complicated now. Now I can just say I'm an author because I just finished this book, and so that's easy, right? I can be like, oh, there's a book. But I mean, the simple answer is that I'm an entrepreneur, and so for the last 8 years, I've run my own business, and it started as like a blog, and then it kind of became something more where there was an online course, and I was kind of doing some speaking stuff. But the backbone of it the whole time has been writing in my email newsletter. I think what confuses people is that my approach is very minimalistic and soft sell. Like for many years, if you came to the site, all you would find were just articles. There was no people were confused because they're like, how does he make any money?
Yeah,
because there's nothing for sale on it. But in fact, I had products in the background the whole time. It was just that people would come to the site, join the email list because they liked what they were reading. And then once they were on the email list, they would get emails about a speaking event or hiring me to speak or a book I was writing or a course I was launching or something.
So you attempted to make sure that people were actually interested in the content before you'd pepper them with, hey.
Right. Well, I tried to never pepper them, even if they are on the email list. I'm just, sales feels a little uncomfortable for me,
sure.
Which is interesting because you're catching me at a time right now where, this is the most I've ever been public about like a product or a launch or whatever, telling people about the book each day.
Sure.
Which feels a little out of character. But, no, I'm excited to share it with people, so that's good. And then my typical strategy is to let people fall in love with the work first.
Yeah.
Let me write an article. If you really love it, then great. Once you get to the end of it, I'll ask you to join the email list. And if you join that, then you'll start getting them each week and so on. And that strategy of leading with value first seems to have worked pretty well.
Yeah, so I first checked out your website, and it's very much what you said it was minimalistic. And I liked the idea that there wasn't too much going on because you could really actually focus on content. And then you get the idea that not only is the content like a nice thing to say, I don't want to say nice thing to say, but helpful tips, but they're often backed by scientific research or behavioral psychology.
Right.
And those are all habit creation, those little kind of things that are not just some guy telling you how you can be a great leader.
His thoughts on life.
Yeah, and it's not just all, there's science behind it,
So
seemingly.
I want two things. The first is I want anything I'm writing about or sharing to be evidence-based or scientifically backed.
Okay.
And then the second thing is I want them to be practical and actionable, to be useful in daily life. And you often get one of those, but not both. You know, you'll get like a scientific idea, but then it's not, people don't translate it that well. It's not that easy to apply.
Yeah.
And so I kind of view myself as like a bridge between scientific research and what the researchers are coming up with or realizing about how our brains work or how habits form or how we can be more productive. And then my job is just to translate that into something that's easy to apply.
So in trying to learn about you without asking you directly, you had, did you go to Denison?
Mm-hmm.
And you played ball,
Yeah.
pitched?
Yeah, so I played a variety of sports growing up, and then my dad played professional baseball for St. Louis Cardinals in the minor leagues for a little while.
Okay.
So growing up, I wanted to be, professional baseball player too. I wanted to follow in his footsteps, and I think I always kind of knew baseball was the sport I was gonna focus on more.
Yeah.
But I did a variety of things when I was younger, and then played baseball all the way through college. And went to Denison, as you said, which was fantastic, and loved my time there. And while I was there, I also did a bunch of the stuff we just talked about, science stuff. So I was a science major, mostly chemistry and physics classes.
Okay.
So I kind of had like writing about that stuff now is not that much of a reach for me because I've like always kind of been interested in it.
Yeah.
And now I just found an outlet where I can both be scientific and apply it to the stuff I really care about, like weightlifting or photography or travel or building a business or whatever.
Kind of blend those worlds.
Yeah.
I think the first, and for me, and you'll have to, I'm 5'6". I can't throw a ball probably faster than 60 something miles an hour.
I probably can't either anymore.
I could probably get better, but like there's just some things in life that I'm destined to not be. Right? That's just genetics.
Sure.
That's okay. But I have another buddy who pitched for Ohio State for a little while. And before I knew you, there were so many similar, personality traits that I just saw on the outside as my buddy Phil, who, and it was just so interesting. And not saying that I know you 100%, but there's somewhat of a calculated approach, and I wonder if like all pitchers can get together and they have a similar
pitchers are a funny breed, so there's definitely there's definitely some personality quirks that are probably shared there.
I'm standing on my hill. I'm just observing. I'm going to adjust my cap. I'm going to look around. I'm thinking about what I want to do, but I'm not going to overthink about what I want to do.
Yeah.
No, but one thing that we always chat about, because he's a super huge Ohio State football fan, is he apparently he threw the ball pretty fast. I don't know. It's somewhere in the 90s, but he would talk about, if I can throw 93, he's like, guys that can throw 96 or 97 is the world of difference.
Oh yeah.
It's just, and to me that's just like, I don't know.
They both seem very fast.
Yeah, it's like, oh wow,
Yeah.
that went by quick. But it kind of relates back to what you talk about a lot, which is incremental improvement over a period of time, kind of compounding those effects.
Well, at elite levels of performance, small differences make an even larger difference in the overall outcome. Like sprinters will train for 4 years just to shave 0.02 of a second off their time, because in the Olympics, that's the difference between the silver medal and nothing.
Yeah.
And that's true at all levels of elite performance. If you're playing chess, I mean, pretty much any of the grandmasters are incredible chess players. The thing that makes the difference is, I mean, they all have like automated the fundamentals. They all have habitualized.
Yeah.
They know where every piece moves and how it moves. They know what the opening plays and like typical formations are. They've internalized all that stuff.
Yeah.
And they've seen it so much that because they have made 98% of the game a habit, they can spend all of their attention and energy on like the last 2%.
Sure.
And so in that way, habits kind of create the foundation for mastery.
Yeah.
And so you see those little margins show up at elite levels. But I think it's just as important for the average person. But we don't feel like it is because it's often hard to see how habits compound. So like, what is the difference between studying Spanish for 20 minutes tonight and not studying at all? It's not really a whole lot. Like you still haven't learned the language, nothing's really changed.
Yeah.
What's the difference between eating a burger and fries or having a salad for lunch? Like, again, scale's basically the same. Body looks the same in the mirror at the end of the night. Like we don't really see anything.
Sure.
And a lot of habits are like that. Like a 1% improvement or 1% decline is very hard to encapsulate or see on any given day. And it's not until 2 or 5 or 10 years later that we realize where this trajectory ends up leading us.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's true for any compounding process. That's why I like to say that habits are the compound interest of self-improvement, because they're like the same way that money multiplies through compound interest, the effects of your habits multiply as you repeat them.
And I think I understand it greatly just because when I figured out finance, and I'm a finance major, compound interest is like the greatest thing that's ever happened.
Yeah.
And
it's like a superpower.
I think Einstein had once, and I don't even know if we can quote Einstein at this point, but
no, I think I know the quote you're saying. I think it's true. He said like a compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world.
Yeah, it's crazy because it just over time, it's just you don't understand
right
the effect that it has, and even people that have experience in life and you don't get it until you're like, oh wait, I missed that.
There's a really good story. It's written by a guy named Morgan Housel. He's a really good finance writer. And anyway, he's talking about Warren Buffett. And Buffett's worth like 89 billion or something now. But the title of the article is what he calls the freakishly strong base. And what he did was he backed into this calculation of what if Warren Buffett had started saving when he was 30 years old instead of started saving when he was, I think, in third grade is like when he first started doing that stuff. Well, by the time Buffett was 30, he had saved like what is basically like $1 million. So today would be like the equivalent of like maybe 8 or 9 million, something like that.
Sure.
So rather than starting at 0, he started at like 9 million when he was 30. And the difference between those early saving years actually accounts for like 86 of the 88 billion that he is worth today.
100%.
And so translating that to any other habit, we often overlook how important the beginning stages are when it doesn't really feel like much. When you're kind of at the bottom of that curve, you haven't hit the hockey stick yet. You're just kind of like sitting in this plateau of death and you don't really feel like anything's adding up, whether it's studying or going to the gym or whatever. But actually those early days are crucial because you have to get through those to get to the hockey stick portion. So like you really need to focus on putting in your reps even when you don't feel like it's making a difference.
Yeah.
Because that's what allows for that rapid growth or progress down the line.
Even if you're just treading water for so long, just being able to tread that water and get to the other side is going to be able to propel you.
I like in Atomic Habits in this book I just finished, I use the metaphor of an ice cube. So it's like
this is chapter 1.
Yeah.
So
it's like you're in a room, right? And it's really cold. It's like 25 degrees. You can see your breath. You got this ice cube sitting on the table. And you start to heat it up in 26, 27, 28, 29. Still nothing has happened. You still got this ice cube there. You get 30, 31. And then you get to 32 degrees, and it's like this 1 degree shift. It's no different than all the other ones that came before it. But suddenly you hit this phase transition, and the ice cube melts. And I think a lot of the time, habits aren't exactly like that, but I think a lot of the time the process is like that, where you feel like you're banking this work or making this, putting in your reps, and you don't have anything to show for it. You still got an ice cube sitting on the table, but it's not like the work was wasted. It's just being stored, and you have to like stick with it long enough to get to that phase transition.
For sure.
And that same chapter, I shared that quote from the San Antonio Spurs locker room, which I just think is so great. It's like, whenever I feel like giving up, I think about the stone cutter who bangs on a stone all day, and at the 101st blow, it cracks in two. And I know that it wasn't the 101st that did it, but all the 100 that came before.
Yeah.
And like it's that same idea, right? Like you can't just crack a stone and expect it to break magically. You need to like bang on it for a while. And all habits are like that. You need to bank the work and like put in the reps, and then eventually it happens. But it's hard when you're in the middle of that. Feels like you're not making any progress.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you said you started your website or your blog, I guess, and you're just blogging typically, but how did it come about? How did you get to that point where, it's like, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to push my energy into. Was there a moment for you? Was there a time when you thought you always wanted to do it, but you just weren't doing it, and finally you got off your horse, or did somebody kick you, or what happened?
Well, I think there's like two ways to answer that question. So the first is like from a big picture sense, like, did I know I wanted to be an entrepreneur? And in that sense, yeah, I think probably at some level I did. I didn't have any entrepreneurs in my family, so I didn't have anybody to look to or like know what that would look like. But I had done a variety of things that, looking back on it, it's like, oh, that's kind of an entrepreneurial thing to do. Like when I was in college, I designed my own major, which is kind of weird to like look at, 50 or 60 options and be like, well, I don't like any of those. I'll just design one.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the same thing as, I don't really like what this market looks like. I'll create my own product or build my own business or whatever.
Sure.
So I think I kind of implicitly have an itch to kind of do that thing. And I really like having the freedom to work on what I want. It's not just about like the time is great, but I want to feel fully utilized. I want to feel like I'm able to be fully engaged in whatever I'm creating. So in that sense, I think big picture sense, yes, I knew it was what I wanted to do. In the smaller sense, or in the like specific sense of running this site or writing about habits or being an author even, no, I didn't have any idea that's what I wanted to do. And in a lot of ways, I'm still figuring it out. And I don't just say that like to be humble or something. Like I really genuinely don't know what I'll work on 2 years from now or something. Like
sure.
The business model might be totally different. It's not like I'm like, okay, I'm an author now and I'm just going to write 10 books for the next 30 years or whatever. So I'm definitely up for exploring. But how it happened, I finished graduate. So I went to undergrad, got my degree, went to graduate school, got my MBA, and while I was there, I had a graduate assistantship in the Center for Entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And my job was to analyze venture capital investment that was like in the region. So I was just like looking at all these companies that were getting funding and stuff.
Yeah.
And that was where I kind of got the itch to start my own thing, where I was like, all right, all these people are doing it, like maybe I can do it too.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I did that for a few years, and then once I graduated, I was like, you know what? I'll just go ahead and try it now. And
sure.
So I had an internship between my first and second year. I was working at a medical company. And then after I graduated, I was like, you know what? I'll just try to like make it work. So I did that, and I totally flopped and floundered around for like 2 years.
Wow.
I just tried a bunch of ideas. Standard entrepreneur story. I feel like every entrepreneur has some version of like, I tried to do this thing and it wasn't what I thought it was. And like I didn't know what I was doing and blah, blah, blah. But I, occasionally would take on like a freelance client to do web design work just to make enough money to like pay bills and stuff.
Okay.
And all the rest of the time I was trying to build these websites. Well,
for yourself.
yes.
Okay.
For like this business that I was trying to build. And I would try different ideas. I probably tried like 4 or 5 different ideas over the course of the first 2 years. And eventually I refer to it as the period where I incubated my skill set. Okay. But I had to learn, like, how do you build a website? How do you build an email list? Why does someone buy something? Like, what do I need to do to drive traffic to a website? Like, all that stuff. So eventually I settled in on that. And in the background, this whole time, I had been keeping notes about habits and performance. And it was just kind of like, I think it was like a 65-page Word document. And it was just James's thoughts on habits.
Okay.
So I knew I wanted to write about that stuff, but I just hadn't yet. I hadn't like worked up the courage to do it. And then 2 years in, I was like, all right, I at least know how to build a website. I've built up an email list on a different site to 20,000 subscribers. So at least that's something. Like I know where to start. So I launched jamesclear.com and published the first article November 12th, 2012. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to write a new article every Monday and every Thursday.
Okay.
And it was really that 2 articles a week habit that change the scope of the business and trajectory of what I'm working on.
Very, very similar to the whole the hockey stick.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it was one of the good pieces of advice I got early on was try things until something comes easily.
Okay.
And so those first 2 years I was trying things, but nothing was coming easily. I was like really having to push to just get any progress. And then suddenly I started writing about habits, and for whatever reason, people really resonated with like my style or approach on that. And it was like, oh, this is the thing that comes easily. Compared to everything else I've done, this has grown faster. And so I just started gradually shifting more and more to focus on that. And then pretty soon I was only doing that.
You're like, why did I waste so much time doing it now?
Yeah, no, that's true. But that's how it feels.
Yeah.
But of course, you can't actually do that without having all the stuff beforehand.
You're building a solid base of things you know what
Yes.
you're not going to do.
Yeah. Well, and you're building, there are some skills that are transferable. Right?
True.
So like how to build an email list, where to put the forms, how to design the website for a good reading experience. Like all that stuff I could transfer over.
Sure.
But I didn't know any of that in the beginning. And that's true for any entrepreneur. There's like all these initial costs that you, not just like financial, but like time cost.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, you want to start a pizza parlor. Well, that's cool. But then like you need to figure out like who, every little basic thing. Who are the vendors you're going to get the ovens from?
Yeah.
Like that's not, no one just is born and knows that, you know, like there's no, you have to look that up. Or like you want to start a clothing company, you want to make jackets. Cool. Well, where are you going to source the fabric from? And like, that's one out of like a million choices that need to be made to run a business. And most of those things are front loaded. You know, like the first year or two, you're figuring out all of that stuff. And then you get to the third year and you're like, oh, well, now we know who our vendors are and we know who, you know, and it's like, it's much
What's that
easier.
like? That's like business 101, land, labor, capital, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm going to need land. All right, I got land.
Yep.
I need an oven. No, I did restaurants for a few years at an early age, and I can't tell people. I tell people all the time, actually. Like, you don't understand. Like, there's so many, just running it. It was, I wasn't the only one running it, but the things that you learn about, oh my gosh, rent costs this much, paper costs this much, food costs this much, people cost this much. All right, now I've got to staff this operation and hold these things in this certain percentage to be able to actually make money to keep the doors open so it doesn't cost me money.
Some of the restaurants blow me away, specifically like cupcake shops. I am continually blown away by that. They charge $1.50 for this cupcake and somehow keep the lights on each month. Like, how many of those do you need to sell
Tons.
just to be able to turn the lights on and pay for the employee's salary? It's just crazy the amount of. I mean, you would need to do, I don't know, maybe it's corporate clients or catering or something that helps them get through it. But I don't know how, you know, I look around and I'm like, well, I'm in here and there's like 3 other people. So like we bought 4 cupcakes. That's like not nearly enough to pay for the hour that we're here.
No, yeah.
Know?
I think that about bounce houses. They usually take up a lot of space, but they, you know, I don't see a lot of income.
Right.
And I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And then there's other business like I don't know, like a drive-through that sells beer and wine. And I'm like, man, that thing always has a line.
Yeah.
I know what's going on there.
Right.
But no, it's always interesting to hear about other people's perspective. And restaurants are hard, man, especially in Columbus, which is just wild. But so from the entrepreneurial side, which is kind of what have you failed at pretty hard?
Well,
what are some of those lessons that you learn? I mean, is there anything that you can teach others from your experience to say, hey, listen, stay away from this, or, you know, try to search, but, you know, try to take away the lessons from it?
Yeah. I mean, there, you know, obviously there's a ton of things. I mean, I'm making mistakes constantly. So there's like a million little lessons. So, I mean, some of the big ones, some things that sound sexy are often not. So like, as much as possible, whenever possible, maintain all equity. You know, like getting venture capital funding sounds sexy. It sounds really attractive to be like, we get raised an $8 million round, but you don't realize how much you're giving up with that. I just saw a great infographic that showed what your percentage of equity would look like if you took angel investment, then you do a Series A round, then you do a Series B round, then you do a Series C round, whatever. And you're growing the whole time. And like you go from this company that was worth nothing to theoretically, you know, like in this example, maybe it was worth $200 million, massive company, huge success.
Sure.
But you keep like $3 million at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Which again, great. Like most people will be super excited to have $3 million. But it's not the $200 million win that you think it is from the outside. And if you instead approach things, some businesses require investment. So, if you're going to start a medical company or a pharmaceutical company or something, like, it's going to be hard to do that without funding. But as much as possible, bootstrap and maintain equity. That's just like a basic business one. But a more key lesson is that early on, I thought that every tragedy that happened, every big mistake I made was going to like wreck things. And the truth is, your business will almost never be defined by one error or by one victory.
Yeah.
For a long time, I thought if I could just get featured in the New York Times, then I would be set. And that's just completely not true.
Did that happen?
It's happened 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
It's great. It's cool. It's a nice little bump for like a week.
Sure.
And then everything goes back to normal.
Okay.
And the point there is that the New York Times or whatever it is, it's not going to come and save you. Like, if you want to build a good business, you have to still show up every week. On the flip side, early on, I had no traffic. I was a very small site. But somehow I was able to get introduced to this guy who had a massive audience, like hundreds of thousands of people. And he was willing to do a webinar with me. And so I thought this was going to be like my big break. I had heard stories about this guy running a webinar and you could like sell a product on it and it would do really well. And like, it would be this huge payday for me and whatever.
Sure.
Well, long story short, he wanted to use a different platform than I had ever used. I wasn't familiar with it. And of course, the day comes and the platform isn't working. And I think you had to upload your presentation like an hour before to that platform. And I just assumed I could like live stream it from the screen.
Okay.
And anyway, it comes to be like 10 minutes before, and I realized this. And we've got thousands of people waiting for this live presentation. And so I'm emailing with the support staff to try to get it up there. And they figured out a way to make it work, but they could only do it if they moved the webinar back an hour. And so without telling me, they just moved it back an hour. So I had like, thousands of people waiting for this thing that then just didn't happen. And by the time we got emails out and let everybody know and whatever, instead of having multiple thousands of people attend, we had like 80. And by the time we got to the end of the thing, an hour later, after we started an hour late, so 2 hours after what people expected, I think we sold like one product. So literally one unit.
Wow.
So instead of it being hundreds or thousands of sales, it was one. And I was just completely annoyed, upset, frustrated, depressed about the whole thing. I was like, I completely blew this. This was my big chance. Like, this guy's never going to work with me again, which, by the way, that was true. He'd never worked with me again. But it all fell apart. But in the end, it didn't matter. Even like 3 months later, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
And so I think just keeping that in perspective, it never feels good to fail when you're in the middle of it.
Sure.
People praise failure a lot, especially in the startup world. People talk about, you got to take risks, you got to be willing to fail, like, failure is learning, whatever. But I think that overstates the benefit or what it feels like. It feels terrible to be in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But you do need to somehow possess this ability to move beyond it or move past it and learn from it, reflect on it a little bit. My dad used to tell me, I played sports, especially after like a tough loss, that you have to both care and not care.
Yep.
And I think that's like a good metaphor for dealing with a lot of life, which is when you're in the middle of something important, you need to act like it's the only thing in the world that matters. You need to work on it like it's the only thing that matters. And as soon as it's over, you need to realize that it doesn't matter at all. And that, I think, is a tough attitude to have when you pour so much into building your own business, but it can really help you get past some of that difficult stuff.
Yeah, that's a tough thing because I think maybe growing up, I don't know if that's very childlike or adult-like, the opposite side of that, where you want to invest emotionally into something and you want to provide some level of support, but at the same time, you're like, we got to move on. We got to be done with this.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, shed tears, got angry. It's over. We learned a lesson. Let's not forget, but we got to move on.
Right.
From a sports perspective, that's a pitching thing, right?
Yeah.
Like you give up a dinger and somebody throws a home run and they're like, coach, like, hey,
last pitch doesn't matter.
You're still in.
Yeah.
Inhale, exhale. Mm-hmm. Hey, next batter's up. Let's do it.
Yeah. And I think you see that with teams that are particularly good at responding to adversity. Alabama football is a great example. Ohio State football is very good at it too.
Patriots football.
Right. Like
that's amazing to me because I pay attention to that. That's a system of excellence you can plug in just like mediocre to a little bit better than mediocre,
Yeah.
and you get pretty good results.
Yeah, they make guys who look like they don't do anything on other teams. All of a sudden, they're like out there catching touchdowns every week.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's very impressive. But I think more so, and the point that I was going to make there is that sometimes all teams get smacked in the mouth sometimes, right? They come out in like the first quarter, it's like, whoa, we weren't expecting this. They ran a trick play. They came out with a really good strategy. All of a sudden, we're down 14-0 or 21-0. But when that happens to really good teams, they still figure out a way to like kill that momentum, at least in their brain. And
Yeah.
it's like, all right, that happened. Like shed
get over
your
it.
tears, move on, right? And
Yeah.
And so they're good at doing that.
So you've got a book, Atomic Habits, correct? Atomic Habits.
Correct.
I got chapter 1. I was pretty excited to read that. I got into that last night a little bit.
Nice.
It was pretty interesting. And you've kind of got it broken down a little bit into kind of sections. What is it? It's like, is it stage 1? I was going through some of the, how is it broken down in the book? Is it?
Yeah. So the book starts with the fundamentals, which I just kind of talk about, like my philosophy of habits. But then the backbone of the book are these 4 different stages, or what I call the 4 laws of behavior change. And basically, I break a habit down into 4 different stages that describe how it works.
Okay.
And
How to create a habit? Or?
yes, how to create a good habit or break a bad one.
Okay.
And so from those 4 stages, you can come up with these 4 laws of behavior change that tell you what you need to do to build a good one or break a bad one. So just real quickly as
Sure.
an example, your brain is going through these 4 stages endlessly and all the time.
Yes.
So you walk into a room and the room is dark. So that's the first stage, is there's a cue. There's some kind of information you pick up on. So dark room, that's the cue in this case. The next stage is that your brain interprets that cue in some way. So it makes a prediction about how you should respond. So the room is dark, and then your prediction is, I want to be able to see, or I'd like to remove the uncertainty of being in a dark room.
Yeah.
So that's what I call the craving. So there's a cue, and then there's a craving, which is your interpretation about what you should do with that cue that you see.
Okay.
Based on the craving, based on how you interpret it, you decide how to respond. You decide what to do next. And so the third stage is the response or the routine. It's the actual habit or behavior that you perform. And then finally, there's a reward. There's some kind of benefit to doing the behavior. There's like a way that it serves you, a result or an outcome.
Yeah.
Or sometimes there's a consequence and then you decide not to do it again. But so in this case, walk into the room is dark. Cue, I want to be able to see. Craving, I flip on the light switch. Response, it's now lit up and I can see. Reward. And so that sequence right there that I just described, that happens in a couple milliseconds, right? It's like instant. And the point is, the more that you perform these behaviors throughout life, the more you habituate and automate those reactions. So pretty soon you're walking into rooms and flipping the lights on. You're not even thinking about any of that. It's all just non-conscious.
Yeah.
But so those are the 4 stages. And then if you want to transform those or translate those into a series of laws that you can use for building good habits or breaking bad ones, then you come up with these 4 laws of behavior change, where there's kind of one for each stage. So for the cue, you want to make it obvious. For the craving, you want to make your habits attractive. For the response, you want to make your habits easy. And for the reward, you want to make your habits satisfying. So make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. For breaking a bad habit, you just invert each of those. So you want to make your bad habits invisible, make it unattractive, make it difficult, make it unsatisfying. And the book goes over many, many ways to employ those kind of like 4 overarching principles.
On how to apply that in your own life.
Right.
That's fantastic. I don't think that I've had my own struggles with things, but you think you want to eliminate it. Like, you want to just be like, okay, I'm going to stop doing this whole thing, and this big problem that I have is going to eliminate itself. But you can think of it like credit card debt, because that has compound negative interest to yourself, or it could be weight loss. It could be a whole host of things. But it's so interesting, and it's like, this tree doesn't come down with only one swing of the axe. Depending upon how long this tree has been growing, is going to change how many swings of this axe it's going to take.
Yeah.
And one day it's going to come down, but, it's going to take some time.
Yeah. I late in the book, I say that the holy grail of habit change is not a single 1% improvement. It's like 1,000 of them.
Yeah.
And so what you're really looking to do is not take one swing of the axe, to use your term, but to layer these 1% improvements on top of each other. And this is one of the reasons I chose the phrase atomic habits, because the word atomic can have multiple meanings. So the first meaning is tiny or small. And I do think habits should be like small and easy to do. That's kind of like a core part of my philosophy.
Yeah.
But the second meaning is that an atom is the fundamental unit of a larger system. So like atoms build into molecules, molecules build into compounds, and so on. And then the third and final meaning is that atomic can also mean the source of immense energy or power. And I think if you combine all three of those together, you sort of get the narrative arc for the book, which is if you make these small 1% improvements, these easy changes, easy habits, and you layer them on top of each other, like fundamental units in a larger system, then you can end up with a powerful or remarkable result. And so the key there is not one swing of the axe, but many. It's not a single 1% improvement, but the combination of many of them.
Yeah.
And when you live in an environment that's kind of like continually nudging you 1% in the right direction, it becomes much easier to make a good choice.
And it is interesting when you do start doing a beneficial habit, and there is that actual reward of how it's like, oh, this feels good. This doesn't feel bad. This is satisfying. Not
the satisfaction is a key part
yeah.
in getting a habit to stick. Feeling. Basically, you can think about it, if the ending of a habit is satisfying, if the ending of a habit is enjoyable, then it's kind of like a positive emotional signal in your brain where it's like, hey, this felt good. You should do this again next time.
Dopamine.
Yeah, right. But it comes, the immediacy of it is incredibly important, the speed of it. So this is something, in the book I refer to this as the cardinal rule of behavior change.
Okay.
But it's the idea that behaviors that are immediately rewarded get repeated. Behaviors that are immediately punished get avoided. And it's really about the speed with which you feel successful or feel unsuccessful, with which you feel satisfied or unsatisfied. Because if you feel good in the moment, then you've got a reason to repeat it. And pretty much every behavior produces multiple outcomes across time.
Yes.
So like if you eat a donut right now, the immediate outcome is favorable, sugary, tasty, sweet, enjoyable. The ultimate outcome, if you continue to eat donuts, is that you'll gain weight or be less healthy or so on. For good habits, it's often the reverse. The immediate outcome of like going to the gym is often like sweat, sacrifice, takes energy and effort. So the immediate outcome is kind of unfavorable, but the ultimate outcome, that you're in shape a year from now or whatever, is favorable.
Healthier, stronger, yeah.
So much of the battle of building good habits and breaking bad ones is figuring out how to take the long-term consequences of your bad habits and pull that into the present moment. So you feel a little bit of the pain right now and you have a reason to avoid it, and figuring out how to bring the long-term rewards of your good habits into the present moment so you feel it and enjoy it right now and you have a reason to repeat it. Which I think with the exercise example is one reason why it's important. There are many forms of exercise. Not everybody has to lift like a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Like you could go hiking or biking or running or rock climbing or kayaking
Spin,
or whatever.
yoga. Yeah, there's a million.
Choose the one that makes you feel good in the moment. Because if even though you're waiting for the long-term rewards of like your body to change or you to get stronger or whatever, if you feel good then, you have a reason to repeat it. And I think you see this in a lot of areas with people who appear to be good at delaying gratification. From the outside, they actually aren't delaying gratification as much as they're finding an alternative way to feel satisfied in the moment. So like it still takes effort and energy for them to work out, but they're not focusing on the effort. They're focusing on the fact that yoga makes me feel good, or going hiking allows me to hang out with my friends or whatever. They have like an immediate satisfaction component.
Or some other form where they said, hey, I'm here for one, but 1A is really nice too.
Yes. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Products are a really good example of this. So like a lot of very successful products have designed little bits of immediate satisfaction that are not required for the product, but just increase the enjoyment of it. And so people become more likely to perform them or to stick with those habits. So like toothpaste is a common example. There's no reason toothpaste has to taste minty. It doesn't make toothpaste more effective at cleaning your teeth. It just leads to like a clean mouthfeel and makes it more enjoyable to use. So it's more satisfying in the moment, which makes it more likely that you would perform it. Imagine if like toothpaste was just some like bland paste that tasted gross, like you're at the dentist or something, and like people wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Another more common modern example, less common, but a modern example. Car manufacturers have started. BMW a couple years ago, they added this system to one of their cars where if you really pressed on the gas or slammed on the accelerator, it would pump fake engine noise through the speakers, right? So it's like more satisfying for you to press on the gas.
It's so sad.
Doesn't actually make the car faster, doesn't change the performance, just change how satisfying it feels in the moment. But the point here, the overarching principle, is that if you want a habit to stick, if you want a behavior to be more likely to be repeated, you need to have some reason to feel good in the moment. You have some reason to feel immediately satisfied.
No, that's great. I really enjoy those examples of that, because that's so true that you have to. I think those come with life. You come with like more. There's more and more layered things that happen to you, or at least you understand, hey, you know, I didn't make this decision because of one thing. Everything has a layer of satisfaction or sacrifice or pros and cons, I guess.
All habits serve us in some way.
Yeah.
Even the bad ones.
There's
right?
a SWOT. We can do a SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Yeah.
You know, if you go to the gym, you might get stronger, but at the same time, if you just lift weights, your cardio may suffer, and that's a weakness. And there's an opportunity to run more, and then there's the threat of injury. You know, like there's always something that can happen.
True.
You know, with everything, everything has some sort of a possible downside. I always joke with people, but you know, the ultimate what is it that I say? Life is ultimately going to lead to death. So, like, get over it. You know, like number one cause of life, or the number one cause of death is life. I think that's like it's just it's going to happen. But so for yourself, the number one habit that you think you have. That you created? Is there like a habit? I know you could think about that for your business, but what about personally? Is there a habit that you've created that you had to, over time, kind of mold? Maybe you hate doing it. I know I hate brushing my teeth. To me, that's like violence against my mouth every single morning with my Sonicare, which is just like, it's like a jackhammer on my teeth. And I'm just like, I hate this. But.
Okay, so I can tell you some that I struggle with that have been challenging for me. So one that it keeps coming back is, I guess for lack of a better term, a power down routine. So I kind of have this like personal rule where I don't cheat myself on sleep. So I want to make sure that I get at least 8 hours a night. Well, that's great, and I can do that probably easier because I don't have kids yet. But if I enjoy the work that I'm doing, or I get into something at like say 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. and then all of a sudden it's like, well, I should be going to bed now, but like I'm kind of flowing. So then, you know, all of a sudden I don't go to bed till midnight or 1. Well, if I'm going to bed at 1, I'm not getting up till 9. So, you know, I would prefer to be up at 6 or 7 because I know I do better work earlier in the morning. But it's really not the sleep that's the issue. It's like the power down. I recently, I don't know if this is true. I haven't looked up the science on this, but I recently had someone tell me that as you get ready to go to bed around like say 10 p.m., your body starts producing a variety of hormones and stuff to like get ready to go to sleep. And if you are getting ready for bed then and like kind of power down and go to sleep, then that's fine. You prepped for that. But if you aren't going to bed and you continue to stay up or like look at a screen or whatever, your body takes that change in hormones, that shift in hormonal balance, and directs it toward the application of whatever you're working on. So it's like in a weird way, it could either prime you for sleep or prime you to be active again. Yeah. Which sounds strange to me because I would think it would just make you tired. But
no. I was talking to somebody about this today. Actually,
really?
I said, I always have. There's a moment when I'm like, man, I am really tired, and it's a 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock time, 10:30 maybe, and I'm like, but I want to watch this show, or I want to have some ice cream, or do something else.
Yeah. And
either I'll have good self-talk, and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to bed. I know where this leads, because it doesn't stop in an hour. Right. There's 3 hours that follow.
Right.
That because I every time I've ever read about sleep cycles, I don't know, but there's like a 3-hour transition time where there's kind of like a wave that happens. It's
you
like
ride that wave.
I'm really tired.
Miss the crest.
So Monday at 9:30, I was like, I'm really tired. We just came back from Disney. at the parks for 4 days in a row, 8, 9, 10-hour days with 5 kids under 11, grandparents. I just drove back all the way from Orlando. I'm exhausted, and then I go to work, and it's great. Work feels like a vacation now. And it's like 9:30, and I'm like, whew, I am exhausted. And I think I was running a calorie deficit that day too, so it's like probably low on sugar.
Yeah.
Or any kind of stored, energy, and I'm exhausted, period. I was like, I went to bed, and I sprung out of bed at 3:30 in the morning like, hey, I can wake up now.
Wow.
But I didn't, because it's just dumb to do that at 3:30. And but no, there's these cycles that you hit, and there was a great podcast. I listened to a lot of Joe Rogan podcasts, but there was a sleep specialist guy.
I heard about this. Matthew Walker.
I think so.
Yeah, I heard that it was good.
It was really good.
Yeah.
And he talked about, the number one thing is create a consistent habit of sleep at the same time. They didn't really say, I don't know, remember said the same place, but your body has that whole circadian rhythm,
right?
Where it's like, oh, it's 8 o'clock, the sun's going down. Turn on this hormone.
Yeah,
get sleepy.
I mean, all that stuff. He may have covered that in this podcast, but all of this process of powering down and getting ready to sleep, it was much easier for us when we lived in tribes out on the savannah or like outside or whatever, because when the sun went down, it got dark.
It's done.
Here in modern society, we have this weird thing where when the sun is up and it's bright outside, we're all indoors working, so it's like dark. And then when the sun goes down, we have screens on and lights on, and it's light. And so it's like this weird inversion, or it throws our whole circadian rhythm out of whack.
Yeah.
So you need to combat that a little bit. But anyway, so power down routine is one of them. Another one that I think about is I talk about this concept in the book a little bit more, of what I would call a decisive moment.
Okay.
So it's kind of similar to what you just mentioned, where you're like, okay, I want to watch this TV show, but I know that actually there's like 3 hours after this. There's
a fork in the road.
Yes. So that's the decisive moment. That's how I would describe it. It's like a fork in the road. And what you realize when you come to figure this out is that actually a lot of habits are, depending on what study you look at, habits account for like 40 to 50% of our behaviors on any given day. So that's already a lot, right? It's already like half of the things you do are pretty much automatic. Tying your shoes, unplug the toaster after each use, brush your teeth, whatever. Like, you're not really thinking about it. But their true influence is even greater than that, because often an automatic habit will lead to what you do consciously for the next chunk of time. So for example, there's a moment every morning where I go down to my office, and either I start writing the next article that I'm going to work on, or I go to ESPN and check the latest sports news. And it's really about what happens in those like 30 seconds that determines what the next 45 minutes look like for me.
Yeah.
Because if I go to ESPN, the next hour is basically lost.
Yeah.
And if I start writing, then I'm fine. Once I start writing, I'll be good. I'll just keep working on it. I won't, fall off course. But it's really about that decisive moment, that fork in the road at the beginning.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true for like lifting. There's a moment where my wife will come home, and either we'll change into our workout clothes and go to the gym.
Yeah.
Or we'll sit on the couch and order Indian food and watch, reruns of The Office or something.
Yeah.
But it's really about that, like changing into the workout clothes, those 2 minutes. It's not really about the 2 hours at the gym or driving there and back or whatever. All that stuff's like pretty much decided, like once you change into your workout clothes, we're going to get in the car. It's already done. And part of me is a little inspired by that, because if you map out your day, you'll see that there are maybe 5 or 6 or maybe even 10 of those forks in the road. And so what you can do is just try to design your environment or pour your energy into mastering that fork, mastering that decisive moment.
Sure.
And if you can do that, then often the rest of it will just kind of follow naturally.
Well, there's something I remember reading, I don't know if it was in your book or on your site, that talked about, what was that about? Goodness. Like decisiveness or distractions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was something about, at least for me, it was like, hey, how about you not get distracted at work when you have the whole internet at your fingertips, and you don't want to do the rest of this work you have to do. And you can just go, hey, what happened on Google News? Hey, what's going on Twitter?
Yep.
Hey. And I think you talked a little bit, was it?
So the friction, many habits we fall into them because they're frictionless, because they're so convenient.
Yes.
So take my phone, for example. So I've started to, for the last year or so, I've done this thing where I leave my phone in another room until lunch each day. And that gives me maybe a 3 or 4 hour block of time where I can work uninterrupted or be focused. And what's interesting is that if I don't do that, if I have my phone next to me, I'll check it like every 3 minutes just because it's there. But if I keep it in the other room, it's just outside of my office, like up the stairs, like 45 seconds away. But I'll never go up and get it. So the question I have is like, do I want my phone or not? I'm checking it every 3 minutes, but I never wanted it enough to do 45 seconds of work and walk upstairs. So a lot of our habits, especially technology habits, are like that. They're so convenient and so frictionless that we find ourselves sliding into them, even though we don't really want it in like a deep sense. We just want to be distracted or to resolve some boredom or fill space or feel differently in the moment. And so we slide into them and do them. And so the kind of punchline here, and to bring it back to your point about distractions and, what's going on Twitter and so on, is how can you design a space for yourself where that behavior has more friction associated with it, where it's a little less convenient to do. Sure. And if you can do that, often they'll fade away without much additional work. That's not true for like an actual addiction, but for a lot of bad habits, that reducing exposure or increasing friction, increasing the number of steps is enough to get them to fade. There's a professor at Stanford, his name is BJ Fogg. He writes about habits a lot. And he's got a good story where he liked popcorn, but he just didn't want to eat it as much. So he took the popcorn out of his pantry and he walked down the hallway and went into his garage, got up on the ladder and put it on the highest shelf in the garage. And if he really wanted the popcorn, he could just go out there and get it. It's like 60 seconds away. Yeah. But his default action, his like lazy decision when he gets home from work and he's tired was, I'm not going to go out in the garage and set the ladder up and climb up there and get it. And whether that will work for every habit or not, I don't know. But the principle is true, which is how can we increase the friction of doing the things we don't want to do and reduce the number of steps between the things that we do want to do.
Yeah. So I know I've seen you walk around a little bit with like a little notebook.
Yeah.
You've got some additional stuff going on with that, don't you?
Yeah. So I have a workout journal that I have used for years to keep track of my workouts and whatnot. But now that I've finished Atomic Habits and like kind of have my thoughts clarified on how to track a habit and how to think about it, I was like, it'd be cool to create my own like habit journal. And if I did it, I wouldn't just do it because like, it'd be nice to have a journal and whatever. But like, could this actually be laid out better? Could this be laid out in some scientific way that is more frictionless, is more convenient to use? And as I started looking at different notebooks, I thought that there could be a way to do this. And thankfully, fortuitously, I just got introduced to Joey, one of the founders of a company called Baron Fig, which is a premium notebook maker out of New York City. And they do really great, thoughtful work. And I like really enjoyed some of the other designs they had put together for different projects. And so we have spent the last year designing and creating the Habit Journal. And it's available for pre-order now, and it comes out on January 8th. And I'm really excited about it, actually. I think it's not just another notebook. I think it's like as useful as any dot grid notebook that you would buy, a Moleskine or something, but then with some very carefully designed additions to make it easy to track habits, to stick with a daily journaling habit, or to just use the notebook like a normal bullet journal or something you would love without it being overly prescriptive or overly in your way. A lot of these design notebooks, they're like too templated. If you want to do anything outside of the template, it's completely useless. And I didn't want a notebook like that. So I think it's both flexible and efficient. It like helps nudge you in the right direction without being overly restrictive.
Okay. So is there like a form? Is it a way for you to kind of? Is there like a chart that you can use in it that you can track a habit? Because I think, you talk about 1% and you talk about, doing things. A lot of people love to write things down, but, and you want those incremental gains. But sometimes if you can just write it down, hey, I did that. People do that on calendars all the time, right?
Yep.
That like worked out,
put an X on that day or something.
Yeah. It helps them go, they can visualize it. Many people are like visually satisfied with, hey, I did that.
So I talk about measurement a little more in the book. It's not always useful for a habit, but
Yeah.
for certain habits, it's really effective. And it's for the reasons that you just stated, which is that putting, let's say each day you do a workout and you draw an X on that day. Well, doing that does a couple things. First, it creates a visual cue. So like if you look at your notebook or your habit tracker, you look at the calendar on the wall, you now see, oh, I've worked out 12 of the last 14 days. And it reminds you, it's a cue to remind you, like, I need to go to the gym today. The second thing it does is there's like an additive effect to motivation where you start to see this streak build up and you're like, oh, I've done 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days. Excuse me. Where you're like, oh, I've done a few days in a row.
Yeah.
And so now I have a reason to go tomorrow because I don't want to break my streak. Right?
Sure.
I don't want to lose it. And then the third thing that it does is it addresses the fourth stage, that make it satisfying idea, which is it feels good for me to record my workout, right? It feels good to close the book and know I did it again, or it feels good to put an X on the calendar and know that you crossed another day off. So all of those are benefits of tracking and measurement. And that was one reason why I wanted to have a habit tracker template in the notebook. So to answer your question, there are 3 main sections to the notebook. In the very beginning, there's what we call 1 line per day section.
Okay.
And so you have 31 lines on 12 different pages. So you could basically do each 1 month. So you can do any prompt you want on those pages. So for example, you could put at the top, today I'm grateful for. And then each day throughout the month, you can write down 1 line about what you're grateful for. Or you could do, today my most important task is, and then you could write down like what the key thing is you need to focus on. Or you could just use it as a daily journal and be like, what happened today? And so you just write down 1 sentence about each day. And the point here is to make keeping a daily journal habit as easy as possible.
Yeah.
So that section is about journaling, but it's only 12 pages. So that's in the beginning. Then there's like 186 pages or 90 pages, something like that, of dot grid notebook. And so that's meant to keep the notebook as useful as possible. You can use it like any other notebook.
Do whatever you want.
Do whatever you want. Like it can replace whatever notebook you have right now. Then at the back, there are 12 habit trackers. And those habit trackers are a template for like putting an X on each day and tracking your habit. And those pages are perforated. So you can tear them out, and if you want to keep your habit tracker on your fridge or on your desk at work or on the wall at your gym or somewhere where it's like more visual or better location for you to keep track of the habit, you can do that. And then finally, in the very back of the book, there are what we call toolkits, and this is content that I wrote specifically for the journal about how to utilize the dot grid in the best or most effective way.
Okay.
So there's a toolkit for decision making. So there are like 2 or 3 decision making exercises you can use. There's a toolkit for productivity, so ways to organize your to-do list or think about your priorities or rank those things. There's a toolkit for health and fitness, so how to use the notebook as a workout journal, things like that. And then the dot grid itself, which is the bulk of the notebook, is actually a new design, which we call a split grid. And so it looks like a dot grid notebook at first glance, but then there are subtle markings at 1/3, 1/2, and 2/3 down the page. And so this is for people who love doing like bullet journaling and things like that.
Or tic-tac-toe.
Okay.
Okay.
A lot of the layouts that people use when they bullet journal are divide the page into either halves or thirds.
Okay.
And so usually people have to count the number of dots down to divide it in half, or count the number of dots to get 1/3 down the page. But now you don't have to do that. You can just see immediately where 1/2 and 1/3 is.
How many pages are there of that?
186, I think. That's the bulk of the notebook.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So you've got 12 1-line per day section in the beginning, the split grid in the middle, which is just the main notebook, and then you have the habit trackers and the toolkits in the back.
Very interesting. So for yourself, that sounds super well laid out and like designed and very thoughtful with the perforations and the divisions. And
Right.
The older I get, the more I'm like, I love list making.
Yeah.
I try to make my wife make me a list every time I go to the grocery store, because I'm like, if you ain't putting it on that list, I ain't getting it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'm probably going to forget something that's on the list, but if it ain't on the list, it's definitely not
happening.
coming
Yeah.
back. I can't remember 3 things to get from another room. I think that's a guy problem, but man, old age and kids, man, they'll drive you to the ground
Oh, man.
and then punch you in the face. So your book comes out October 16th?
October 16th. I'm really excited about it. Yeah. So it's called Atomic Habits. It launches October 16th. You can check it out at atomichabits.com. And on that page, I've got all the information about the book, but there are bonus guides on how to apply the ideas to business, how to apply the ideas to parenting. There's a secret chapter that's not included in the final book, a variety of other bonuses too. But anyway, all that stuff's at atomichabits.com.
So, man, this has been, how long have you been working on this?
3-year project.
Jeez.
Yeah, so 3 years from signing the deal to launch day, which is cool to see it finally come to fruition.
Exciting, scary?
Mostly exciting now.
Okay.
Yeah, the scarier part for me was earlier on. I really struggled writing under a deadline and like with the publisher's expectations and stuff. And they, to their credit, they were fine. It was all me internally being like, oh gosh, what if I miss this deadline? What if, they don't
Now
like
there's
it?
an
What if
expectation.
yeah, like they think this book is going to be great. What if it's terrible? Like all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And I was also very worried about my peers' opinion of the book. Like, I thought the average reader would really like it. I think they'll find it useful. I think they'll find it practical. But I was worried about, like, other experts, so to speak, on habits who write about that stuff. And, like, what are they going to think? Like, are they going to think that it's just average? Are they going to, think I said something stupid, whatever?
Sure.
The early response has been very good, both from readers and from experts. And so that has, like, eased some of my fears. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people who, have a nitpick with it or something. But
there's always going to be haters, man.
It's great to see how many people have like really genuinely loved it so far.
That's
is a really good feeling.
That's great. I remember like when I've done speeches in front of places at work, and the only time I ever feel really uncomfortable is when I'm not the expert in the room talking about a subject that everybody else is an expert on.
Oh yeah.
And you're but if you're the expert of your topic, generally it's pretty great.
Yeah.
Because that you can't, your credibility isn't going to be in question.
I hesitate to use the word expert to describe myself because I really feel like my readers and I are peers, that we're like, we're all just trying ideas out and trying to do the best we can. And the only difference is when I try things or try to implement things, I just write about them and share them with everybody.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to try to keep that like beginner's mind, where you're like, okay, if I was approaching this anew today, what do I have to learn? What do I have to focus on?
Yeah.
But yeah, having said that, I've written hundreds of articles on habits. I spent 3 years researching the topic and writing this book. And, I feel like I know the topic well now. And so I'm proud of the book, and I'm excited to share it with everybody.
No, that's great. And I like the philosophy that you seem to have, at least I've picked this up. I've seen other people pick it up. It's easy to embrace as a theory, but it can be difficult to kind of employ in your life, which is just focus on the journey of what you want to do or delivering something in a consistent rate. Don't be so focused on, and I think about it for the podcast is, everybody will come at you with, oh, what did you get? How many people downloaded?
Right.
Oh, are you excited? What's next? When do you get a sponsor? I'm like, that's really not my focus. My focus is just to have great conversations with people. And if I make $0, I'm still going to do this tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because I like it.
I think that's great. And it's also like your job is not to judge the work. Your job is to do the work. And then everybody else can decide if they like it or not.
Yeah.
And while they're deciding, you can do more work.
Did that take a long time for you to get to? For yourself?
I don't know that I'm there now, to be honest.
Okay.
I think one of the things, I am there on some days.
Okay.
And I think that this is one of the reasons why writing about habits and writing about the system and process is valuable, is that we need to be reminded of it constantly. It's not a one-time thing where you just flip a switch and you're like, oh, I'm a process-oriented person now. We'll chase results like, everybody, you'll be like, well, you show up next week and be like, oh, I want to bench press 300 pounds in the gym, right? Or I want to double my income next year. I want to, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, we'll chase those goals still, but you need something to bring you back to center.
Sure.
And I hope that the book is one of the things that can do that.
Yeah. Well, great, man. I appreciate you hanging out with me and doing a podcast. And you can check James out, jamesclear.com, and also atomichabits.com.
You got it.
Man, thank you. Thank you so much. Everybody go check it out. Go buy his book and be ready for that pre-order.
Thanks,
What's
man.
what's the notebook called again?
Yeah, it's called the Clear Habit Journal, and you'll be able to see that at jamesclear.com as well. If you just go to jamesclear.com and click on books, you can see both the Habit Journal and Atomic Habits.
All right, man. Anything else?
No, I think that's it, dude. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hey, not a problem at all. Thank you. Man, was I right or what about this guy? What a great episode. I was so happy to have him, especially in-house. This guy's flying to New York. He's been on literally national news. So it's a big deal for me to have him, and I am just so thrilled. And such a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. Pick up his book. I know I am. Got it pre-ordered. And ready to pick this thing up. And read it through. See what I can do to make my life a little bit better, little by little. Atomically. But check him out. jamesclear.com or atomichabits.com. It's bound to be something that's going to explode, man. I'm super excited for him. And I'm super excited that you guys listen. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.